we are not there yet. So we're here, there. We are live.
Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Ancestral Healing Center. Welcome from wherever you are in the world today, and a special hello to our Irish viewers. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I know Bernadette is maybe celebrating that a little bit as well. Are you doing anything today, Bernadette?
Nothing too special. Nothing too special. It's a quiet celebration. I get to be Irish every day.
That's true. That's true. The rest of us just have to pretend some days. Yeah.
I will say
some people have all the luck.
I will say for those out there that my maiden name is Bernadette Margaret Teresa O'Brien. So there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you and welcome. So I want to go ahead and get everyone centered today because as we do every Tuesday here at the Ancestral Healing Center, we are going to be deep diving into the exploration of who you are. We're super excited for our conversation today. I know that Michael and Bernadette have special things planned for us today. So as we do that, I'd ask you to, wherever you are in the world, I'd like for you to turn off your phones, not if you're watching it on your phones, maybe just turn the alerts off, and grab a journal and really find a place where you can step into a little bit of quiet and reflection. So there may be lots of things that are coming up today that we hope you find that you're able to reflect in your own life around. Some of those things might be a little bit triggering. So Michael, Bernadette, and I will be sharing personal stories of our own experiences with ancestral healing. We'll also be sharing confidential client stories as well. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, we have found that after doing this, the power is in hearing the stories and telling the stories. So you may get really visceral reactions to some of the stories that we're hearing. And if you do, that is a cue for you to maybe pause and possibly write down what you're feeling in the moment. See if any memories or recent experiences come up, but they are gold. That is really valuable information that we want to slow down and pay attention to. Also, if you have concerns about the visceral feeling that you're having, please don't hesitate to email us about your reactions to some of the stories. And you can do that at info@ancestralhealingcenter.com or Bernadette at ancestralhealingcenter.com. If you resonate more with her, Michael at Ancestral.
Sorry, can I just jump in? It's support at Ancestral
support.
Healing Center.
I'm sorry. Support at Ancestral Healing Center, or one of our names at ancestralhealingcenter.com. So today, as always, we have a specific format, but we really mix it up a bit within the format. We're going to be going over some core teachings and principles that we stick to here at the Ancestral Healing Center. We're also going to be reviewing some insights from our clinical work, and then we're also going to have some meditation, visualization, and kind of tapping into our body that we're going to be able to do together as well. So with all that said, I am happy to let Bernadette take over the show.
Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are Irish today. We start every live with giving you some information about what ancestral trauma is. And so before we talk about ancestral trauma, I just want to say, let's ground ourselves a little in what trauma is. So trauma is not just a dramatic event. At its core, trauma is an experience that overwhelms our nervous system and something that happens to us or around us that we don't have resources to fully process in the moment. So it gets stored in our bodies, in our minds, in our sense of self. And we don't even recognize it at the time. We may feel it initially, but not understand that that trauma is staying with us. And what's important to understand that is that trauma doesn't have to be something that happened to you directly. And this is where we get into ancestral trauma. Ancestral trauma is unresolved family pain that gets passed down through the generations, through our genetics, through our family systems, and the stories that we are told or aren't told. So it shows up as beliefs, feelings, and behaviors that feel confusing or out of place in our own life. And so you may begin to feel that no matter how hard you look at your life, you can't find the source of what this deep fear is, or this pattern or sadness that you're feeling. And so that's often the first clue that you're carrying something that may not have started with you. So what are sources of ancestral trauma? Any shocking or deeply destabilizing event has the potential to become a source of ancestral trauma. So when we look back, we think of abuse, physical, emotional. It can be physical, emotional, sexual, neglect, particularly children who were unwanted or unfavored or made to feel like they didn't belong. It's sexual improprieties, affairs, divorce, or public shaming. Those are events that carry an enormous amount of social weight and were often buried in silence, especially in earlier generations. Abandonment is the sudden death of a parent, adoption, or a caregiver disappearing from a child's life. That shock, if it's not grieved or explained, it gets handed down. Unexpressed grief, and this is probably one of the most common, sudden deaths, stillborn, premature children, losses that families simply didn't have the language, but more importantly, they weren't given the permission to mourn. So it was one of those things, if something happened, grief was just put to the side. But grief has to go somewhere, and it finds itself a home in the next generation. So another thing is financial or social scandals. So court cases, loss of status, sudden poverty. And it reminded me of the stock market crash of 1929, because this created ruptures in the family's sense of safety and identity. And I worked with a client who didn't know why her grandmother was so angry at her grandfather. But as we looked further, we discovered that her grandmother had come from wealth, and her husband, her grandfather, had lost it all in the crash of 1929. And not only had they lost everything, including their home, they ultimately had to live with family for the rest of their lives. So you see how that great loss can be passed down. So what I want you to take away today is, if you're here, something in you is already searching towards an understanding. And you don't have to know exactly what's happened in your family line to begin healing. Awareness is always the first step. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you, Bernadette. Michael, was there anything that you wanted to add to what Bernadette?
Very, very quickly, just as a soundbite, I'd say, trauma is pain frozen in time.
Yeah.
And it's an incomplete experience. And the purpose of ancestral healing is to complete the experience. So it's brought back to a peaceful neutrality.
And I would just add that, there are so many things we could talk for a very long time about all of the things that are ancestral trauma.
And I think maybe we'll deep dive into a little bit of the specifics. And I don't know if Michael, are you going to do that in our mini insight?
Yeah, I've got a mini the 10-minute tip for this week. So last week we had a very entertaining, if that's the right word for this environment, discussion about the porch goose of denial. So it's like, how do you follow that? So this week I've decided to stay with the farm animal theme. Ruschelle's mind has just gone into overload here. And so today's 10-minute tip is the silence of the lambs. Silence as a survival strategy. So when families encounter hardship, something curious often happens. And just like lambs before slaughter, they fall silent. Not always immediately. So at first there may be noise, confusion, blame, or frantic attempts to fix things. But over time, a deeper pattern emerges, which is silence. And the event that shook the family, like these sources that Bernadette just mentioned, affairs, abandonment, addiction, and always shame, slowly becomes something that's not spoken about and sinks below the surface. So what we call a family secret is rarely just a secret. It's more like a sealed chamber in the unconscious life of the family. Everyone knows it's there, even if nobody has ever opened the door. Children grow up sensing its shadow long before they understand it. They can feel it in the atmosphere. There's a tension when certain subjects arise, a sudden change of vocal intonation, or silence when there should be explanation. And as children, we learn very quickly there are places we do not go. And this is how silence becomes generational. The original hardship may have happened decades ago, perhaps before the child was even born, but the emotional consequences ripple down the family line because the underlying trauma was never transmuted, and instead it was buried. So when something's buried in our unconscious, three things always accompany it: fear, shame, and the inability or refusal to take responsibility. We're afraid of what we might discover if we opened the chamber, if we looked the silent lamb directly in the eye. We feel ashamed that such a thing happened in our family, and so quite naturally we avoid it. The problem is that the unconscious does not respect silence. What we refuse to speak, we must act out. Sigmund Freud called these parapraxes, repressed fragments of consciousness, not entirely robbed of the ability to communicate. They show up as patterns of behavior that seem unrelated to the original hardship. Anxiety, emotional withdrawal, addiction, people-pleasing, anger, which could be repressed or explosive, the vague feeling something's not quite right. These patterns may seem isolated, but they're often part of a constellation of symptoms of stunted development and inherited trauma. Children in particular are highly sensitive to the emotional minefield of their homes. They instinctively adapt to survive it. If the family's rule is silence, the child learns silence. If the family's rule is avoidance, the child learns avoidance. When neither fight nor flight are available, we turn to freeze and fawn, or in this case, sheep. And so the pattern continues. Another generation of lambs falls silent to avoid the emotional slaughter of speaking out. Most families don't choose silence consciously. They're simply trying to survive something that felt unbearable at the time. In many cases, the original participants lacked the emotional language or the psychological capacity to process what happened. And that silence was in its own way protective, like a cloak, but protection that lasts too long becomes imprisonment. Over generations, the unspoken story distorts the family narrative. Descendants inherit emotional fragments without context. They experience feelings of shame, abandonment, anger, grief without knowing where they came from. It can seem as if these emotions have appeared from nowhere. We're the only ones feeling them. Everyone else is fine. Yeah, right. They've been percolating beneath the surface for decades. The bones of lambs long frightened into silence and passed away. Families often imagine if they keep silent long enough, the past will fade away. Yet the opposite is usually true. What's hidden in the unconscious tends to repeat itself in new forms until someone is willing to bring it into the light. Is that someone you? This is why genuine healing often begins with curiosity. Someone asks the obvious question, why are the lambs quiet tonight? Why does Aunt Joan fall silent? With her eyes glassy, her voice hollow, and skin greasy and pale at the mention of her estranged brother. Someone begins to trace the story backward, the patterns, behaviours, emotional currents that run through the family. You know my method, said Sherlock Holmes. It is founded upon the observance of trifles. With ancestral healing work, we are all detectives. Piecing together clues, we come to recognize the present is alive with echoes of the unresolved past. And when that happens, when the silence finally breaks, something remarkable happens. The shame that kept the family quiet begins to lose power. The ghosts that once governed behavior from the shadows can be seen, understood, and integrated. The family finds its voice. What was once a sealed chamber becomes part of a larger narrative, a narrative no one is afraid to speak into. And with that shift comes a profound realization. The hardship that once silenced the family no longer has to define it. Because the moment we're willing to look directly at the past, the cycle of silence can finally begin to end. Ruschelle, any comments?
I had many, Michael, and we're on a different platform, so I can't type anymore while you're talking. So I need to find a different way to kind of capture all this in my own brain. But one of the things that I was thinking was, for people listening, they might be thinking, well, if it's silent, how do I even know what I'm looking for? Like, what am I even looking at? It's kind of like finding a blind spot. What am I even looking for? So any thoughts or answers to that question? When you say silence, what am I even looking for?
Yeah, so what is it? Looking for the blind man looking for a black cat in a darkened room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the ancestral healing trains you to look at the genealogical record from a different slant.
Mm-hmm.
And we can feel the silence. We can feel that there's something there. And it's kind of eking that out. So very often we're looking for some of these things that Bernadette mentioned before, like the premature child or stillborn child that was never acknowledged. If you go into the feelings, if you connect with that sense of not quite right, and you run with it, it will pull you towards whatever it is that's not quite right. And it's trusting your own instincts. Because, hey, you can't just set out to look at your genealogical record and find what's missing. But you can look at events and say, what might have happened there? Somebody went to war there. What happened there? They came back different. Something happened. Somebody went to business. The business failed. Okay, but you think, okay, it was just a data point. Business failed. What was the emotional impact of the failed business? It's looking at these points of rupture from a feeling perspective rather than just mentally going, oh yeah, data point. Okay. Bernadette, do you have anything that you want to share with us?
A few things have come up because in our family, they're actually kind of, both are kind of associated with grief, but you just brought up the unborn child. So I wanted to share. So I am I've always told I'm one of 8 children. But there were 10 of us. And there were 2 boys that died as infants. One was older than me and one was younger than me. And my brother was just saying to me the other day, when I wrote the book, I talked about that we were 8 surviving of 10. And he said, you're one of the only ones that will say that. Everybody else wants to say, oh, we're one of 8. And it's this idea that they didn't matter. They were too little. Why would we care about them? And they had names. We knew them. One had an operation and was told that he was fine, and then succumbed to a staph infection. So, there was all this trauma, but it wasn't spoken about. And it just made you have talked about that unborn child that in your mother's family.
Yeah.
And so that's really where it's just, here we are, we're all fully grown, and I have, now we're just starting to open up that.
Yeah, so I'd recently discovered that I actually had an uncle. So my mother had an older brother who was born 3 months premature in 1921 and died after 25 hours. And at some point in her life, my mother drew up a family tree where this child was named and shown in the correct place, and then she crossed it out. There was just a big X over it. And it was almost like, oh, I've made a mistake. I shouldn't be doing this. And there was another family tree from my grandfather, and this child wasn't on it. And it's actually looking at those two documents and seeing the difference and going, what's happened there?
I will say one more thing that just came up as you were saying that. Now that we have Ancestry, like Ancestry.com, and places that we can put those deaths come up. Those, you find them in the documents sometimes. And so both of my brothers were shown, in Ancestry and are on the tree. So just Ancestry has helped, Ancestry.com, and looking back has helped a lot.
Okay, so we might be able to explore the genealogical data and find points where we might want to pause and take things more seriously or think about the emotional impact. So I guess, Michael, one thing I'll kind of do a takeaway here is that if you're looking through your genealogical information and you see something that is a point of reference or an outlier, you might want to have in front of you a note card that says, what is the emotional impact here? And not just look over it.
But also it's to scan the documents with your feelings as much as with your mind, because you might just feel a little something that your mind would miss if you're just looking at it as a data point. Your mind just goes, oh yeah, whatever.
Okay.
And it's just
okay. So I want to define that the somatic data there. Mm-hmm. That I think this is very, very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their mind around and start accessing. Illness. I think people who have been through illness maybe have a certain advantage, or at least I feel like that was my advantage from when I got sick. So I am very somatically impacted by data. And I think this is an important topic to talk about because it's a skill. It's not some magic thing that, I mean, some people are better at it than others, but I'd like to hear from Bernadette and Michael. We're going off script a little bit, but I think this is important. I know, Michael, I have watched you and listened to you long enough to know that you're very good at facial expression and noticing tone of voice and change and shift in energy in a person when they encounter ancestral data. And I know Bernadette, you have a sense and a feeling that, I don't know, I'm putting my hands out here because I feel like you kind of channel it in a little bit. So yours is a little bit different, almost coming from behind, where Michael is analyzing what he's looking at. Now that's just how I describe knowing you, but can you share with the audience a little bit about what does it mean to have your body tapped into the data?
Bernadette?
I will say, as a researcher, when I do genealogy research, when you listen with more than just your eyes, and you're trying to find the moment that you uncover I just did it this morning. The moment that you uncover something that is different, that there might have been an emotional reaction to, it goes into my body. I feel it in my body. I happen to be looking at an ancestor of somebody I know, somebody connected with me. And I happened to go to the 1900 census, and we've talked about this before. And this woman had 7 children, and only 5 were still living. And that moment for this, I haven't shared this information with the person it belongs to, but I felt it in my body, and I know the emotional feeling that they will feel it in their body. So for me, it comes in just with the knowledge. It's like when I find that piece of information, it's like it talks to me. It's like the records talk to me and say, this is bigger. Stop here. This is bigger. I don't know if that's answering your question.
So yes, Bernadette, it does. Being open to the skill of tuning into letting the data speak to you, letting the records speak to you, and being open to other types of sensations and information and not dismissing them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So as Bernadette described before in the core teaching, so all trauma is an experience of emotional overwhelm, which is an experience that's in excess of our capacity to feel it at the moment. So we're always dealing with a deficit of the ability to feel. So whenever you do ancestral healing work, and you are able, or you're helped to connect with something from the past in the way that Bernadette's just described with this client, she's going to walk through this experience, what happens is that your capacity to feel grows. So as a natural result of the ongoing process of clearing your trauma, you reconnect with your body. So as Ruschelle said, this is not a special thing that some people have got and others haven't got. It's a skill. It's like some people go to the gym and some haven't and some don't. So as you do the work, your ability to recognize the somatic clues grows automatically with the process of doing the work. So you don't need to worry if you're not having this in the first place and going, oh my God, no clue. And I can't do this. Yes, you can do this. And as you do it, you will start to get that feeling. And as you do it, you then gradually over time, you're aware, or certainly I'm aware, I don't know about my delightful co-hosts, but I'm aware that I've got both my mind and my body engaged as radars as I'm scanning a document or talking to somebody or whatever, and then I register something on the radar and go, ooh, what was that?
Yeah, and I don't, over the years when I've worked with clients as a therapist and a trauma therapist, I don't consider myself to be psychic in any way, but I do think that there is a connection of a field, because I would find myself using analogies that came from their family history that I was unaware of. Like just the other day, I was speaking with a client about trauma and I said something like, it was a values conversation and doing things outside of your values. And I said something like, well, you wouldn't, if you bought a bunny, you wouldn't let the bunny starve or something like that. And that had happened in a client's history.
Mm-hmm. I find that often.
Why would I pick a bunny? This is not like a comment. I don't even have bunnies. I don't know where that comes from, right? Where does it come from?
So Michael, I think will understand. It's an energetic, there's energy and when we talk about the trauma that we are carrying, that comes from, it's an energy can't be created or destroyed. So those thoughts, those things are still kind of out in the ethers, and we do have the ability to pull them in when we don't realize it, because sometimes it just comes out, like you said. And that has multiple times happened to me, where I've brought in a saying and they're like, that's exactly what they would have said, things like that. So just know that you don't have to think of it as psychic. It's just energy, and it is around us, and it stays, and it gets passed down, and it stays with us.
Michael, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I was just going to say, it's a natural ability that's latent in most people. And the process of consciously coming to the work and aligning with the work activates the ability.
Absolutely. It is a latent ability. Yeah. And it is absolutely something that it's a muscle, and you can grow it. Absolutely. Did I share the electrical story? No, I guess Michael hasn't heard it. The shocking story. No.
One that you shared with me the other day?
Yes, but I don't think we shared it as a recording.
No, I don't think so.
No. So I'm going to share that very briefly, and then we will jump into our next core teaching, but it's relevant because it's energy transfer. So as Michael and Bernadette know, March 3rd, 2014, I had started having the symptoms of psychiatric Lyme disease. And one of the symptoms was convulsions for 9 days, that lasted 9 days. And then after that, I had shocking nerve pain. And that, I eventually got better, thank God. But I was in this, I would tell my husband, I feel like I'm being electrocuted. I feel like I'm being shocked every few minutes. And this lasted for, the whole duration was a couple of months. So that was many years ago. And over the course of my recovering and getting better, I've had these little insights from my ancestors. And, that was what brought me to this work. So I woke up the other night. We have been doing these chats together, but I haven't been digging in my own family history. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I texted my mother and I said, Mom, can you please remind me, was there a child who was electrocuted in our family? And Mom said, yes, your grandmother's brother was electrocuted. He was 11. And he had climbed up. We live in a coal town. He was looking for spare coal on slag piles. So the slag is the coal waste. He was looking for coal to keep the house warm on the slag pile. His father had died, so he was out there trying to do that. And he got sucked into a power line and was electrocuted. And my grandmother found him. So I woke up in the night and I thought, oh my God, my body, I knew right away that was my grandmother's trauma of finding her electrocuted brother. Mm-hmm. And that was a story that I had heard 10, 12 times in my life. I had completely forgotten the story. I had previously had no emotional response to the story because these are people I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Yet I know that was my body expressing my grandmother's pain.
I love that you just brought that up, Ruschelle, because we often think that ancestral healing, ancestral trauma is all about emotional pain, that it only shows up as emotional pain, and that physical things, that you are talking about a physical thing that was passed down that was part of the emotional, but it opened up as a physical. And I think that's really important as people are listening, because it isn't, there are no ancestral trauma, ancestral healing doesn't have, it's not everything that lined up in a row. It is very unique to each person as the trauma is passed down and their experiences unfold in this lifetime. So.
Thank you, Bernadette. And I just want to say one other thing to that. Right after it happened, the 2 days later, I had an incredible gift brought into my life that was not expected. And that is the purpose of me wanting to even share that story, was because the release brought something really big and good into my life. And that is why, it doesn't have to end with the pain and expressing the pain. It opens our energy up for really good things to come to us.
Mm-hmm.
So and honestly, I don't think that I would have had that experience had we not been doing these cafe chats, because I really think that it came out of that. So yeah, Michael, were you going to add something to that? No. Okay. All right. So let's jump along here. Core teaching number 2 actually kind of goes along with that. So we have 4 core teachings here at the Ancestral Healing Center. And today I want to go over the first one, which is knowing the science. It's very important that we know the science and epigenetics behind ancestral healing. And everything that we just talked about sounds really, really woo, but we are validating these things in research more and more every day. So the one that I wanted to focus on today, the bit of information, was really actually an honoring of Irish families who have lost their fathers, or families who had to grow up with fathers. So I want to put it in the context of, the suffering that the Irish have collectively gone through civil war and through famine, and just many. One of the saddest stories I ever heard was on a trip to Ireland, and one of the guides was talking about losing their father in front of their home due to the war. So being without fathers, this is some of the science that you may think, oh, my mom grew up without a dad, or my grandma grew up without a dad, and that didn't impact me. Well, in fact, we know that growing up with a father is very, very impactful on a child's development. And I want to go through a little bit of that today. Moms cannot replace dads in the development of a child. So having a good mom and a good grandma and female figures in our life is wonderful, but it doesn't replace the development that takes place when dad is present. So if there was the loss of a father in your family, these are kind of some of the things that we can consider. One is, if dads are around, there's more boundary setting, and there's more boundary setting and challenging. So there's more ability to become proficient with healthy boundaries when dad is there. There's more stimulation and novelty in the home. I know if my husband wasn't present, I don't wrestle my 14-month-old like he does. They wrestle. I don't wrestle. I don't want to wrestle. I'll read you books. So there's more physical stimulation and novelty when dads are present. Oh, and then there's different kinds of play as well. So that overlaps with that. The attachment research shows that father absence increases the likelihood of increased insecure attachments, difficulty with trust, and again, I said boundaries, and a heightened sensitivity to rejection. So moms are the ones that are a safe haven for us to come home to. And dads are the ones who make it safe for us to go out into the world. They're the ones that are saying, get out there and do that. And I've got your back. And if dads are not present in the family, then that is something that the kids are exposed to, is that support to go out into the world. They have a increase in stress response because of that. So higher baselines of cortisol are found in children who do not have fathers. They are quicker to fight or flight, and it's more difficult for them to calm down under stress. The behavioral studies out of the UK talk a lot about what happens when dads are not there. So there are many longitudinal studies from the US, the UK, and the Nordic countries. Emotional issues are increased anxiety and depression, and increase in difficulty regulating emotions as well. Children are more impulsive. Girls actually develop faster. Girls hit puberty faster if dad is not around. And they believe that that is a biological adaptation that says, hey, this environment is not safe. You better hurry up and reproduce because you may not have as long to reproduce. We know that kids have lower academic achievement when dads are not present, and there's reduced executive function. So inability to plan things and take action on plans as well. So that's one of our whys here. You know, ancestral healing goes right along with childhood trauma and neglect, and that they go hand in hand. So if you're someone who's experienced childhood trauma or neglect, it's more than likely that you come from a lineage of that wasn't just an isolated experience for you, that was something that was happening long before you. So I don't know, Michael, Bernadette, any thoughts about fatherless homes? And
yeah, I would like to talk about so if you have a generation with a fatherless home, let's look at the next generation down. And you might have a next generation down where you have father and mother in a household, but because of the effect of the previous generation, you may find that the children, the third generation, are actually, because of the impact on the previous generation, there's an impact further down. So I grew up in a situation where both of my parents were present, but both of them had suffered double abandonment by their parents, and so it was my experience growing up was one of abandonment. It's the one feeling I can remember from my childhood is abandonment, and both my parents were completely present, but the modeling wasn't there. They were physically present, but the modeling wasn't there. I have one memory of my father doing something playful. You know, he never played football with me. He never did any of those things because he didn't do them himself. And that because of his losses, he wasn't able to model those qualities that the father is supposed to be able to model. And so there was a lot of follow on, and that would be a very interesting study to not look at the children of a fatherless home, but the children of a fatherless home, and see what you find down there.
So does the absence carry on?
Mm-hmm.
Even if somebody's present?
Even if they're present, the absence carries on.
Great example of ancestral trauma being passed out. Yeah, I have seen that many times. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I couldn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I blamed myself.
Well, I wanted to share, Ruschelle, because you talked about the Irish. My great grandparents were Irish famine immigrants that came to New York City, and they had 5 little girls. And my great grandfather died when the oldest child was 10 and the youngest one was 1. And so that family grew up. They ended up in orphanages, and the mother was unable to support the children emotionally because it was too, and of course that's been passed down. But listening to you talk about all of the connections that, you know, things that are present when their father is not there, it was so impactful for me as I was sitting here listening, thinking, oh my goodness, those 5 girls. And then, as Michael said, then the next generation down. So there's just wanted to share that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe something for our listeners to think about is patterning, looking through the family history, and was there the loss of a parent as the children were growing up, and what impact might that have had? And I'm actually going to go back to my family too and look, because there was loss of a father. There were fatherless homes there that I can point to as well. Okay. So on that, I think Michael has, Michael, do you have a mini exercise for us today?
So I do have an exercise. So Bernadette's been leading us through some lovely meditations for the past few weeks. So I thought we should put a stop to that. So today we're going to do a little bit of an exercise rather than a meditation. And for your fans out there, she will be back. Just put up with me for this week. So this is one of the first tools I developed when I was starting to unpick generational trauma. And it was a tool that I called the Family Stability Index. And I was very much looking at this issue that Ruschelle's brought up here about instability in families over generations. So this is based on the concept that the stability of a family is significantly impacted by the presence or absence of the grandparents. So thinking of your typical three-generational family, you've got the youngest, the children, are just busy being children, and the middle generation are the ones who are in distress. It's the parents. They're trying to make things work economically as well as raising the children. And the third generation, the grandparents, have been through this, and hopefully they've got to a place where they are financially and emotionally more stable. And they've got time and resources to be able to help out the family, whether it's financial short-term issues, whether it's babysitting, whether it's providing a place to stay for a while, lending a car, coming over to cook meals after a pregnancy, all these sorts of things. And all of these little things help keep a family together and stable through times of difficulty. So if we turn this into a tool, we can see that the number of natural birth grandparents who are around at the time you were born is a potential indicator of how much stability and how much support your parents had, how much stability there was in the family. So this is a scale that runs from 4 to 0. So if you've got 4, that means that all of your grandparents were around. And this means grandparents who are not just physically alive, but engaged with the family. Not somebody that's been either kicked out or has disappeared or died. So 4 is obviously the best possible outcome. 3, you've got one grandparent has gone. Perhaps somebody's died early from an illness. Probably still quite a lot of strength and resilience there in the family nonetheless. Once you get to 2, you've either lost one grandparent on each side or an entire set of grandparents have disappeared. So what happened there? You're starting to see the signs of potentially larger trauma. Once you come down to 1, you've lost 3 grandparents gone, and obviously when you come down to 0, the whole lot are gone, and there's basically been no support, or perhaps some support from step-grandparents, and very little support for the parents. The step-grandparents can be very supportive, but also the presence of step-grandparents indicates that there's been some kind of rupture, some kind of shift, dramatic shift in the family. So I'll just ask you to ponder, where are you on this index? And just to check in with who are those people who disappeared? What are those? What were the causes? Again, we discussed earlier in today's program about not just thinking of from a mental perspective, but actually feeling into what were the causes of those losses, and have those losses been grieved and healed. On this index, I'm a 0. None of my birth grandparents were around when I was born. I had 2 step-grandmothers, and again, as I said before, an indicator that there had certainly been problems earlier on. So I'll just, as a takeaway for today, is just think about where you are on this index and just checking in with those grandparents who may have been absent and just filling in some emotional blanks around what happened at that time.
Bernadette, any thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
There's a fire engine going by. No, it's just powerful because Michael and I both know that, we lost our grandparents. Both of us lost our grandparents to tuberculosis. And, when Michael explained that scale to me, it was, I want to use the word shocking, but not too shocking, but it was an eye-opening experience to look at that and say, well, wow. Because that's what I'd come from, and I had not really recognized the impact of that. So that's, I think.
There's power in turning it into a number.
Yeah.
And when I invented this or created this, I really thought it was so basic to be useless. And the number of times people have just gone, oh.
Yeah.
I saw recently a couple of people on social media have been talking about the brainwashing of needing your kids to leave the home as soon as they turn into adults. And that, historically, this is not what happens to young adults. They stay close by and they have and maybe grandma even lives very next door or in the home with them, and that they're, historically, multiple generations have lived very close to each other for most of human history. And I think there's a systemic disconnect there that has been normalized that is extremely unfortunate, because we need our grandparents and we need our parents close by even after we turn 18. 18 is not can you even say you're an adult, really? I don't know. Right. So thank you, Michael, for that. I think it could lead to a lot of other things, right? If we have a shift in how we think about what families are and what families can do with us, we might want to preserve our relationships and hold a little bit tighter to our families than what we have been doing.
I suspect that as we wake up to the necessity for ancestral healing, that a return to these more fluid living arrangements, less houses, but with more, but where you can have 3 generations cohabiting, I can see that coming back because there's so much power in it.
That they could accumulate wealth, right? I think baseline, it disenfranchised people financially, and a number of other reasons as well. So that's a whole other discussion. So, but I mean, maybe Bernadette, I know, did you have some questions, or Michael, were you leading the Q&A today?
No, I'm leading the questions, but in one, as we always say, every time we do one of these, that we can do, we could do a whole series on these topics. I am going to, because it is St. Patrick's Day and because we did not do a meditation today, I'm going to allow us to kind of end this on not on a little bit of a late note. And as it is St. Patrick's Day, I would like to know, what ancestral pride do you feel connected with your ancestors? So I'm asking you to think, we've talked so much about the hard, the difficult things. What is it that you look back, and maybe it's one ancestor that in particular that you feel this particular pride for, and maybe it is your whole ancestry as a so would either one of you like to start?
You have one? Yeah, go ahead.
I've got 2. I want to kind of give one is like, again, is kind of answering the question by speaking about its opposite. And so
I don't know, Michael, this is supposed to be uplifting, this part.
Yeah.
I might cut you
So this
off.
This is about my father, who was actually born in Wales.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a rift between his father and his grandfather. And eventually my grandfather, so my father and his father moved to England, and he grew up from there. But he was born in Wales, but he never had any pride in being Welsh. And the Welsh are a very proud country. There's a lot of pride around the rugby and the Welsh, male boys, the boys' choir, and these institutions of Welsh culture. And my father never had any time for any of that. And I have a cousin who lives in Wales, in a place called Anglesey, and I remember going to visit her one time, and I was driving up there, and I was just completely overwhelmed and in tears. And I was thinking, what is this? And I realized that I was grieving for my lost Welshness. So there was that pride wasn't brought down, it wasn't expressed, and there was this piece of me saying, should have been there. So now onto the upside. I say I have my grandfather on the other side was one of the very, very early pilot. He was he built his own aeroplane in 1909, though we believe it didn't fly. He got his pilot's license in 1911, which was the number 79, 79th pilot's license in Britain. And he flew the first scheduled airline service in Britain in 1914. And then he flew in the First World War, where he was twice decorated for bravery. And he had an amazing career from 1909 to 1929, as far as I know, without suffering a scratch.
That is a lovely story.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So is that upbeat enough for you?
That's totally lots of pride in that one. Ruschelle?
Yeah. So I'm going to do, we've talked a lot about fathers today and the importance of fathers. But I have been, because I'm writing a book about women and rewriting the narrative of women in history, which is actually a trend. Not sure. I am seeing a whole trend of women rewriting narratives. So I've had a lot of fun rewriting my female ancestors' narratives and putting them where they actually belong, which is in the category of complete and total badass. Like complete and total badass. Just can't imagine the unfathomable things that they dealt with, and they still raised competent adults who then went on to have children to raise other competent adults. So the women out there, super, super excited to hopefully channel the best of my female ancestors and male, but that will be for a discussion of another day. Also, as you all know, I'm getting my Italian citizenship. I encourage anybody who has a grandparent who was of Italian heritage, if you are interested in that, there are options to get your Italian citizenship. And it kind of comes full circle. And maybe we'll touch on this next week, to this idea of going back to your homeland and connecting with your homeland. So is it forward of me to propose a high level topic for next week that we kind of think about that a little bit? Like the
next
power.
Week's episode will be entirely in Italian.
Yes. I will have figured that out. But that's a whole other discussion, right? Being proud of your language. So that's mine. I would say, Bernadette, I don't want to cut you off, but I do, because I would love for you and Michael for the next couple of minutes to talk about your work and how people can get in touch with you, and encourage people to do that if they found today valuable. So,
Michael, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I'm a ancestral healing coach who specializes in facial recognition, apparently. And I've published 3 books on topics related to trauma, very much a specialist in the area of shame, and bringing whatever is down in the unconscious to light, things like toxic masculinity, imposter syndrome. And I just wanted to highlight one of my books here, the Generational Trauma Workshop Manual. So I come from an industry background, and in industry, you make things as simple and robust as possible. So this is a very nuts and bolts approach to trauma. So it's quite a different approach from the more academic and more therapeutic approaches. So if you're that interests you, you can find that on Amazon. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. So I am Bernadette Thompson, and I am a certified grief and trauma specialist and a trauma-informed genealogist and an intuitive ancestral healer. And what I do is I work with many people who are grieving and who are trying to feel, who have a pull towards their ancestors, who don't know where to begin, and who have had, or maybe had some experiences that they can't quite explain. They feel the emotional ties. So I do some work where I help people look back at their ancestry and also to understand their emotions connected with it. And so my website is tellmeourstory.com, and it is Tell Me Our Stories from the point of view of the child asking the parent, tell me our story.
Awesome. So definitely connect with Michael and Bernadette if you would like to go deeper in this type of work. And until next time, have a great week.